Hello and welcome back to the Hmong Woman podcast. My name's Dochi.
I'm Ariel.
I'm Emily.
And today we are going to be talking about corporate America, navigating our way through corporate America as a person of color and being a woman and what that's like. So diving right into it, have either of you ladies had instances where you felt like your work or your voice didn't matter because of your identity?
I think there has been times where I felt like work was not that it wasn't given to me, but taken seriously because of my identity. And there are multiple parts of my identity. So my age, my race and ethnicity, my sex. And in this instance, I felt like this one was not given to me because of my age. At some point, I was the youngest in the organization, and we were planning, essentially like a virtual hybrid conference. And it was a one day. And I remember going, okay, well, these are the things that we're going to need. And I'm leading these projects. And I took on that project. And I remember I did a staff training. And I was like, here, so you're going to use the platform. I had a manual written. I recorded that training session. I'm like, here's what we need done on that day. I will be coordinating everybody's Zoom room. I'll be coordinating all of your volunteers and your moderators. Like everyone's going to go through me. And they all have their own Zoom link. So if there's any tech questions, any concerns, you just come to me. I will be available. I'll be jumping from room to room to room to check. And then after that whole conference, we did an after action meeting. And I remember some of the feedback was like, well, we just felt like we weren't really supported as staff in Zoom because we didn't get any training. And I'm like, excuse me? So yeah, we didn't receive any training beforehand. There's no email instructions. There's no manual to follow. And I was so surprised. And then these people were all older than me. And I'm like, first of all, I know there is training because I held 2 different sessions and I sent all the manuals. And I just remember being so frustrated after that call. That's the first time I'd ever cried on the job. I was like, this is how frustrating it is. And then our executive director was in that meeting too. And she's like, oh, there was absolutely no training given. They're like, no, there are none. And so I just remember being so frustrated about them lying, or even if they weren't lying and they just truly didn't recall. I'm like, you really don't recall me holding 2 2-hour sessions to train you? And a big part of that, again, I was the youngest. And so a lot of the things that I said, they're just like, are you sure you know what you're doing? Are you sure you don't need help? Are you sure you're comfortable with that? I'm like, yeah, I literally have planned this from start to finish. And overall, a lot of our participants and our presenters, they had no issues. In their feedback, they didn't have any issues accessing the rooms, accessing the platform. I'm like, it really was just staff were being really fucking dumb. And I wasn't given the due credit that I deserved, essentially. I felt like after that, my performance review for that specific event, just didn't do well because of that feedback from staff. And so I literally had to send a screenshot, and I was like, here's the training. Here's the email I sent. This is where collecting receipts comes in handy. And I always say for people to collect and maintain those receipts. And I'm like, here's proof that I did training, sent them follow-ups, sent them reminders. They all acknowledged it. So there's no way that they can say that no training happened. I was like, if I was an ineffective trainer, they should have said that. Mm-hmm. But I know that I wasn't, because it wasn't my first time holding a training. But one of my coworkers ended up texting me afterwards. She's like, you had 2 trainings. She validated that I wasn't crazy about it. So that definitely is scarred into my brain of that. And I just since then, I was like, I'm not going to hold any more trainings. And I followed through with that. But now I'm holding a staff training in a few weeks here. But is seared into my memory. I just that was my first year working at this organization, and not at the current one. But I was just seriously, this is so. And I was 23 at that time. So I was pretty young compared to a lot of the other staff members. Mm-hmm. And I had not yet. I was on the tail end of my graduate degree. And so they were just like, oh, you didn't know what you're talking about. I just felt so out of whack, out of place there because of that. But yeah.
I like when you mentioned the paper trail, because I think working corporate, that was the one thing that I made sure to keep track of so well, is like whenever I had a complaint or something I just didn't like I had a paper trail of it. And that made it so much easier to report to HR and to keep track of the things to basically make sure I wasn't going crazy. Yeah. So I like that you did that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's something that I will always encourage people to do. Like, if you have a proposal, right, and you're like, hey, you bring it up to your supervisor in a check-in, like, write it down, write the proposal down, write that you met at this date, at this time, you talked about it, you addressed it on your agenda, and then that way, if like a year from now people bring up your idea as something new, you can say, actually, I came up with this project plan a year ago and I was told to table it. And so always write everything down, like Ariel said, and like record it, right? Like, I made this project plan a year ago, I'm proposing it again, because that came in handy for me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's sad that you do have to, I mean, working through corporate settings, that's when I really learned you have to keep receipt of everything. Of absolutely everything, because then otherwise, or they'll try to gaslight you into pretending like it never happened like that. So, yeah, but what about you, Ariel?
I think the first few things that came up to me were not exactly like where I felt my worker voice didn't matter, but I felt like I've been put in situations where on one hand, it's like people didn't treat me in a good way because they thought I knew everything. And then on the other hand, people didn't think I had the work ethic. And so they would, what is it called? They would micromanage me. Yeah. And so I've dealt with both of those spectrums. And on the left hand, where people thought I knew everything, like I think I've been in jobs where I enter as a new person and they're like, oh, she's okay. And then like I don't really get any of the proper onboarding. Or it's like probably because my age too, where it's like, oh, she's young, she'll figure it out. And it's like, no, don't leave me out here. So I think it's just really difficult navigating the corporate world, especially as like a young person of color, is because, you know, especially since I'm Asian, people think I know everything. It's like, that's not always the case. Like sometimes, honestly, I'll pull out that IDK card too. I'll be like, I don't know, go ask her. Because honestly, sometimes that works to the benefit of my favor, you know? And then on the other hand, I feel like I've also been micromanaged. Thankfully, like when I worked in profit, nonprofit before my whole business, like I had a lot of really good managers, I want to say. And like I got along with the majority of all of them. But as I started my virtual assistant business, like I started realizing that a lot of the people that I worked with, they either never worked with someone of my knowledge and expertise. And so they were never really used to working with someone who specializes in things or someone as young as me. And so I was often met with the same as you, Emily, where they were like, oh, you sure you know how to do that? You're so young. It's like, oh, thanks. Like I would just brush it off like, thank you. But on the serious side, I'd be like, no, I know my stuff. Like if you want to do it and you want to take it over, like be my guest. And some people actually say, you know, they stop dead in the tracks and they're actually like, oh, no, you can do it. It's like, see? In my head, I'm like, nay. But yeah, and then like I think the worst case was when I was working with a virtual assistant client where she literally just told me, yeah, I just feel comfortable if you could BCC me on all your emails. And I was like, interesting. And so I did that for a couple of days and then I had to come back around and be like, this isn't working for me. And if you don't want to move forward in this relationship, then I think we have to cut ends. And we eventually just stopped working together. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think you guys both handle those situations really well. I can't say it was the same for myself. When I first, confidence has always been an issue for me. So I preface with that because when I first got into corporate, I went through a staffing agency. And so that was my technically first big girl role, working in an office setting in cubicles. And I was really excited. And I was a customer service rep. I had to work alongside of, you know, my business partners and the sales reps. And I was the youngest there. And it was me and I think 4 or 5 other reps. There was one she was probably the nicest. She was closer in age to me because she was mid 20s, and at that point I was like early 20s. And she was super nice, very kind, and if I had questions I would always just gravitate towards her because she was the most receptive to it, and she was the most open to like showing me, oh, like this is what you need to do. But and even my own supervisor, she was nice, but she was just there. Like similar to what you're saying, she just didn't help me with the onboarding, with the training or anything like that. So I would just try to sit in and shadow the one girl that was kind enough to let me do that. And that's how I learned my job. And this was such a rough work environment because of that part. And then there was a particular customer service rep who, she was older and she just was very passive with me. And when we would have our little powwow weekly, we would go over our numbers and what's going on in our departments, if we need help with any orders, whatever, right? And she would always have something very passive to say about the work that I've done. And I'm like, wait, hold up. I checked, like very similarly, I would check to see like if it was done correctly, just to make sure I didn't like do things incorrectly because I was still so new. And it would be like, oh yeah, no, that's great. But then in these meetings out front of everybody, it's like, well, this could have been done better. But she wouldn't point fingers. She would pretend like, but it's very obvious that that's my client. I work with them. And so I would have to just step up and be like, oh, I'm working with that client. Is there something wrong? It's like, oh, I didn't know you were doing it. It should be okay. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with that.
Annoying.
It is. So I like, at that time frame, I'm like, I don't know what to do. But again, the girl who was younger, she was always really nice. So she kind of like briefed me on, oh yeah, she does that quite a bit. Honestly, she'll keep doing that to you until you get more like into your role. Then she kind of like backs off a little bit. And then slowly afterwards, that girl actually found a new job and she left. Boy, was I stressed out in that job because my sales rep, they did not listen. We had certain scheduling times and I could never tell him what to do. And he just did not listen, and it made my job really hard, and then I would get the grunt of everything because he would tell our clients that they can come up and pick orders when they're not ready. And then our shipping department would get mad. And so it would come back around to me. And there was one particular instance. This was pretty much the cherry on top that made me decide after my contract, I'm not continuing. So I did my 6-month contract. That was how long I was there. I was there for 6 months. And towards the end, stupid salesperson kept scheduling for his client to come in because, they get percentages if they have a good loyal customer. And so he had left already for the day, and all of a sudden I'm about to close out and our shipping and receivings manager comes over from the production area and he starts yelling at me like full on. I'm sitting at my desk and I still remember that he comes over and he's like, this is you, right? And and he's like just going off. He's like, you can't be telling people to come and blah, blah, blah. And then he's full on just shouting at me. And I'm just frozen there, and I kind of glance around at the other sales rep. Like nothing. And so he finishes his little rant thing. He walks away, and I kind of just sit there, and I like get teary-eyed, and I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck to do. I still have a couple more minutes left of my shift. So I wrap up my stuff, and my supervisor, like immediate manager, she doesn't come and check in. Like they just all pretend like nothing happened. And so I was like, all right, well, it be what it be. And then I get my butt up and I turn in the last of my paperwork. And as I'm trying to wrap up, he comes back and he's like, I just want to say that I'm sorry for yelling at you like that, but you have to know that you can't do this. And I'm like, did you even bother to like check to see like what had happened? Because that whole time you shouted, you didn't even give me a moment to explain what is going on. I don't even know what you were talking about. And so I tried to be as calm as I could while still voicing myself because like Doechii at this time, it was hard enough for me to even voice myself. And so my voice was quivering. I was afraid. And he was like, well, what's the situation? I was like, first of all, I didn't even know that was scheduled. Like, that was scheduled through the business rep, not me. And so it was very unfair of you to come and like yell at me like that and in front of everybody when we could have talked about it. He still didn't apologize. He still said it was my fault. And he was like, well, you should know better for next time. I'm just letting you know because you're new. And then he walks away. It was the day after that my manager, he pulled me in. Basically, there's no repercussion for that guy. He's like, that guy kind of has those kind of issues. And, you know, it's happened from time to time, but we'll talk to him. I'm like, doesn't sound like a place I want to be, but okay, buddy. So that was my first big girl job. I definitely cried at that one. Definitely was not seen. And my age did not help at all. I hated that passive aggressive bitch, to put lightly. But I've had a mixture of supervisors. I've had really good ones and I've had really bad ones. And you've heard a good fair share of them. But yeah.
That's messed up. Wow. So you did report him to HR?
I talked with my manager because he pulled me in the next morning and he was like, hey, so I kind of heard what happened. So I'm assuming one of the sales reps went and told him. And so he pulled me in and he wanted to hear my side. And after I told him, he was just like, oh, okay, well, we'll talk with him about it. And I never reported it to HR. I think because he took it that way, it already made me feel like, okay, well, seems like this is a continuous problem. Seems like this has happened before. Like I loved our scheduling team. And so I talked with them quite a bit. They're like, yeah, no, this has happened before, unfortunately, but they just don't do anything about him. I think because so I was in the paper printing company, or industry. And so they are just desperate to have workers. And since I told they didn't want to lose him. So it was easier for them to lose me as a sales or as a customer service rep than to lose him as a shipping receiving like manager in their production side. And so
I don't know. I think for me, like I've always been really proactive about that stuff. Like whenever stuff happens, I clock it. And then if it's serious enough, I report it to HR.
Yeah.
Because for me, like, I don't care if it's a passive aggressive thing. I don't care if it's like a rude ass fucking email. I don't care if it's like racist things you say to me. I'm going to clock it and just report it. Because I think for me, like, I know myself well enough. I can't like work with people like that. And even if it's like a repetitive behavior, like that's even better to report it to HR, to be honest.
No,
so
not me during that time. I was
Mm-hmm.
shaking out of my boots. I was like, do I even want to go back in tomorrow? But yeah, I did. I made it to the end of my contract. And then I just told my recruiter that, you know, it's not a place for me. And then that was the end of that experience. But yeah.
Honestly, though, that's why I love temp agencies, because you're not stuck there for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And once your contract's up, you can get out and move. That's why I love it.
Yeah, without any kind of repercussion. That's exactly why. I think temp agencies get such a bad rep. But I'm like, you know, it's not just a time for that company to test you out. It's a good time for you to test them out.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, you can just tell your recruiter, like, hey, this is not for me. Like, these are the issues there. And they know. They know, because if they can't keep somebody in that job and they have to continuously fill for that role, they already know this company has issues, you know? So it's a good time to test one another out. Do I really want to stay here? And that's exactly why I like going through temps.
Yeah. They do really get a bad rep, but I've worked with a lot and they're really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But just to move along here, how do you feel like you need to navigate spaces if you were the only woman of color, such as like code switching, not seeming too aggressive, or becoming more agreeable?
I'm not the only woman of color, but when we are in office, then I am typically the only person of color. And like none of my coworkers have made me feel any less. But it is you can tell in the conversations that we have that we grew up in very different parts of the world, even though most of us were born and raised in Minnesota. So like they'd be having a conversation and I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And I just sit there and like nod along and be like, bless you.
Thank you, guys.
And just be like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what that means, but it sounds really great, you know? And so it's not that I don't share anything with my coworkers, but if it's not pertinent or if I don't think that it's relevant, I really don't talk anything personally with them. If I have a question about what they're talking about, I just go, yeah, what's that? Okay, cool. And then I never bring it up again, because at the end of the day, like, I'm just there to do my work, do it well, and then get paid and go home. Do you feel like sometimes you're left out of conversations? And I think that's less of a, for me in my workspace, about me as an Asian woman. Now, if I'm going out externally, then yeah, that has a lot to do with it, because some people that we work with externally would rather not talk to me. They would rather talk to my like white coworker. But like, just in the workspace itself, like, I think honestly, when I started to not care about my job and started acting really passively about it, like, I'm going to do what I'm getting paid to do at my pay rate. So I'm only getting paid $20 an hour. I'm going to work $20 an hour. And I think they started to notice that, because I was no longer like going above and beyond. And so that's when I started feeling like I had no one in my corner. That's when I started feeling like I was getting left out of conversations, because I finally was like, I'm not going to work myself to the bone when you've never given me the credit for it. And then you have always left me out of the conversation in the first place. In the past year, I think we've had a lot of changes. And again, like I said earlier, when you keep your receipts, right, and you bring it back up, people are like, well, why wasn't that talked about before? Why didn't that happen? And then you have all the receipts to back you up about reasons X, Y, and Z why it didn't happen. And so I feel, as much as like I've been stressed out and like I feel bad about some of the things that have happened, I'm also like, finally people are fucking listening to me at work. Like, I'm finally getting the due credit that I deserve. I should still be getting paid more, but at least at this point, I'm being recognized for the work that I'm actually doing. And so that's really it. That doesn't answer the question of how I navigate it. I navigate it the way how I am. Like, if you are going to say something to me out of left field, I'm going to call you out on it. If you're not doing your job and I have to hold you accountable, I'm going to hold you to it. Like, I just had to email a coworker the other day, and I'm like, I've left you multiple notices for the past 3 months, and each month at the beginning of the month, you get it wrong. Like, what do we need to do to make sure that this is more efficient for you? Because I can't keep you accountable anymore. And they're like, oh, I just need to fix it. I'm like, yeah, you do. Like, we have 3 months of history here. And then, right, another situation. Hey, these emails are delayed by a week. You need to get those to us a lot sooner. Like, what do we need to do to fix it? Oh, I just need to. So like, just calling it out there, like, obviously do it tactfully, but like, instead of letting it just fizzle and be like, they'll figure it out. They're not going to figure it out. I mean, if they let it go the first time, okay. But if they let it happen again, like, it's a hobby of theirs. And so like, you just need to call it out. And I'm tired of the whole narrative of like women in corporate, like, we need to be a little bit softer spoken, and we don't need to be like aggressive like men. Trust me, I work with a man who does that at work, and it's fucking annoying. But like, you really just have to navigate it by speaking like your language and holding them accountable. And like, yeah, you have to learn a little bit about their language in order to like come to a compromise when it comes to like work tasks. But at the end of the day, like, you just have to make sure that the language that you're speaking is like clear. And like, that's how I navigate it. Like, if you're not listening to me, let me make this absolutely clear. And then you're going to see that I have it written down. And so I've avoided a lot of negative work situations by doing that. And same for like people externally who have issues because I'm an Asian woman or I'm pretty young. And I've had that written out in email before of people telling me that they don't want to work with me. And so I'm like, okay, like, it's just letting you know this is on record. So I'm going to move it forward, and then you can work with them. But if you have any issues, you can't come back to me to help you. And you just have to make that clear. So that's how I navigate. I'm upfront about it and honest about it. And if they don't like that, then they can deal with the person that they really want to deal with. So
I like that though, because it eliminates all the gray space.
yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
How do you navigate it?
I think the first thing that I really thought of is like, I've always felt the pressure to mold myself to certain settings. Like, whenever I enter like an all white space, I always have to ask myself, like, I have to scan the room first and like sort of gauge how safe I actually feel. And then that obviously affects like how I carry myself, how I speak, how much space I take up. So for me, like, I always want to make sure like I'm safe. And so that also leads into like the group work that I do and like the work that I put out. So I always just tell people, like, I do feel like it's a heavy weight, you know, especially having to hold that and having to, it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
And the thing that came up for me too is that I feel like as a person of color, I've always really struggled in the past of not being able to relate to my white managers.
Yes.
And I say that with pure honesty because like I'm very extroverted, and as you guys know, like I can pick up a conversation with anyone. But I think at the end of the day, like it's just been a real struggle for me, especially having people of color managers and then all white managers, where it's like sometimes I feel like there's a disconnect, and sometimes I do feel like it's harder to get to know them because we come from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And then I also feel like I have to work harder to get to know people, and I also feel it where they're just not interested in getting to know me too.
Yeah.
Because I've been in situations where I worked in corporate for a year and a half. My manager was really nice, but at the same time, like I felt like all of our conversations were very surface level. And I think and that was like my first real corporate-y job. And I think in that moment for me, I was very much of like, well, if she wants to get to know me, she can get to know me. And so I never took those first steps to really get to know her. But I think that experience showed me that like me personally, I can better relate and get along and personally understand people of color who are my managers or directors a lot more. And so for me, I know a lot of people can relate to that because I feel like there is that almost imbalance of power too. And yeah, it just doesn't, I guess for me, it doesn't impact me that much, but it makes it a funner place to come to work to when I can feel like I can personally relate to my manager or director. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that because I can relate to that 100%. I think that initially when I started working in corporate, I would do that. I would get an idea as to like who's in here, first of all, and how should I be perceived, and if like I should be softer about how I talk, or how do I want to present myself basically. And I feel like I do that so much, or I did that so much that it turned me into this character. I've noticed I act dumb, which is, I know it sounds ridiculous, and it is, because then when I do speak on the things I know, it comes off as very like, then they don't want to listen. But I realize in previous work settings I've been in, if I act dumb, apparently they love talking to me. And they love being able to show me and teach me things. But in the long run, all that does for me is then I get people who are obnoxious, who are always around my shoulders. And I've learned basically that I prefer to do things more of how Emily does it now. I think I've finally gotten exhausted of trying to feed into the egos of my white counterparts. And the last place I was at was just the best place ever. I had a white manager, and I switched from one director to another. My first director was nice. The second director couldn't even remember who I was, long story short. But I always felt like I was competing for a place or space. And I always felt like I was always trying to suck up to them so that I could potentially get an opportunity to like go somewhere. And I felt like I had to go above and beyond to be seen or heard or be recognized. And I honestly felt like, at least at that position, I felt like I was unaccomplished until I was looking at my accomplishments. I was like, no, within my first year here, like I've made the boards. I just don't know why I'm feeling so unneeded here in this office. So yeah, I did used to take the passive route of like not letting things bother me, or just pretending like my ideas not being recognized didn't bother me. But now I do have a person of color as my manager. I'm in a very diverse work setting, which has never happened before. I absolutely fucking love it. Like, I love it so much. The pay is, okay, long story short, it's a pay cut from what I was at before, but I see so much more opportunity here than I did at other positions I've been at, where I'm either the only person of color, or I'm maybe one of three in like the entire department. I might not see them. And so I just think it's important to have diversity in your work environments, especially if you're going to have, like, if you're going to be working with people of color, to be put simply. Because at least at the last job I was at, it was interesting because we served a huge population of, like, people of color, you know, and the majority who were in, like, management or who were recruiting into these areas, and I would, during orientation sessions and stuff, there would be some comments made by our advisors where I'm like, wow, you really don't understand the backgrounds of these people, and that was just very rude, but you're so out of touch, you don't understand what the fuck you're saying at all. And it rubs me the wrong way, but at the same time, I can't even say anything because nobody here is going to understand it. So that's how I used to navigate it. That's how I'm currently navigating it, and how I'm choosing to just being more upfront about my feelings, how I feel in those spaces. I'm doing better at note-taking, holding receipts. But yeah. But anyways, with all those experiences, how did you guys work past these situations, these experiences, ensuring that they didn't define you or stop you from succeeding in your careers?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice I have for that helped me is like, keep receipts of everything that you've done, and not just like receipts of emails and communications, but what are the accomplishments that you've done at work, right? You successfully launched this project. You successfully merged this partnership. You did this internal project. Like, keep track of every single accomplishment that you do, what you did for those accomplishments. Put that in your job description. Put that in your resume. No one's going to vouch for you the way that you vouch for you. And then also, like, know what your boundaries are at work. What are your limitations? If you have a full plate, say no. Or say, you know what, I don't have the capacity for it now. Maybe it's a project for another month. And I think that has really helped me stay on top of my workload, but also like be as successful as I am right now. I'm not out there public speaking. That's not like what I want to do, but I enjoy the work that I do because it's good work. And like, I've done a lot of great things in my job because I vouched for myself and I've kept my track record clean, and recorded everything that I've done. So that's how I've continued to navigate it and make sure that I'm successful in the work that I do. And maybe that's just a piece of advice that other people can take too.
Yeah, I personally think that the biggest piece of advice I would have is that I don't think the answer is for us to keep molding ourselves to fit these systems that clearly weren't built for us. I think the real work needs to be done in shifting those spaces so that being a woman of color isn't seen as like a diversity ad. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think the other piece of advice is I'm a big person on reciprocity. So for me, like, if you want to get to know me, then you'll put in the effort. But if someone chooses not to get to know you, that's a big indicator of them and not on yourself. Because I used to really take that to heart. But I think at the end of the day, that's just a really big indicator that that setting might not be for you.
Yeah, I think you guys both said it perfectly. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning back in for another episode with us. If anything, go ahead and comment your thoughts below and follow us for more.